Hey again, everyone. Thanks for sticking with me. Your humble narrator, Phil Dawson here. These chapters have been fun so far. Hope you've been enjoying the story. I definitely have enjoyed bringing it to life for you. Now, a quick reminder about our awesome sponsor, Gamers Dreamland. If you've been hearing me talk about them and haven't checked them out yet, I ask, why not? This is the place to go for your Magic singles, whether you're building a competitive deck, hunting for a nostalgic piece, or just casually upgrading something you love. TCG Player Gold Seller means fast shipping, trustworthy listings, and a huge variety of cards. And the best part, when you use the link in the show notes, you get 10% off your order automatically. No codes, no extra steps, just click the link and the discount is built in. Head to gamersdreamland.com. It's that simple. And supporting them directly supports this podcast, plain and simple. So if you're enjoying the story and want to help keep it going, this is a great, easy way to do it. That's Gamers Dreamland, your online LGS. Chapter 12. This was no sedan chair. Rebecca had helped design the interior spaces of this flying ship, had pored over her husband's plans for canvas and spar, propeller and strut. Now she rode in it, in the seat beside Yawgmoth. "I had no idea you were a flyer," she said, her eyes tracing out the fertile lowlands of the Losannan Basin. The broad valley led to the great city of the same name and beyond to the sea. "I learned when I was a healer in Jamura. The only way one man could cover 200,000 square miles of sparsely populated tribal lands." He adjusted a lever. The cockpit bristled with them, each labeled as to function and each bearing a distinctive grip so they could be manipulated without looking. Of course, those craft weren't anything like this, held together with vines and spit, driven by Power Stone chips the size of your thumbnail. Not like this. Even among airships, there were few like this. Most were cargo dirigibles with great masses of inflated canvas above, providing lift to the slow and ponderous craft. They often had slim propellers at the end of pivoting arms. Sleeker craft were fewer, war vessels stationed along the borders of the Empire, poised for airstrikes against barbarian incursions. These fast bombers and fighters rarely approached Halcyon. The ship they rode in now was the elite of the elite, one of 8 cutters built by the Thran capital. They were designed for the express purpose of quickly fetching elders and eldists from far-flung city-states to attend emergency councils. Each cutter could carry up to 30 persons with little room for other provisions. The vessel held itself aloft by means of a rigid set of curved wings that arced up from a central hull of the craft. These were aided by a pair of buoyant vacuum spheres, one in the nose and the other in the tail. The wings and silver-painted canvas of the cutter made it seem like a giant shark with mouth agape. Its tremendous speed and agility only strengthened the impression. Regional uprisings had been averted by the fearsome sight of 8 shark-skinned cutters arriving over a city. The cutters flew once or twice a year. Revolts were quelled and peace was restored. This time, the uprising was not an oppressed underclass, it was a disease. This time, Halcyon flew its own delegates out to the cities at large. "We'll be able to see Losannan soon," Yawgmoth said, easing a lever that was linked to 10 separate struts. "It is a beautiful place, tropical with palms and lush forests. It's also booming. They've been converting swamp where they can and building stilt houses on it where they cannot. So it'll be an interesting stop for you. You said you wanted to study the architecture of the Empire?" "The architecture of the Empire, yes. That's why I came," Rebecca said, nodding as if to convince herself. In truth, she had come for a whole host of ill-defined reasons, the least of which was the architecture of the Empire. Rebecca had come because Glacian had been comatose for nearly 2 months. The shock of his burned manuscript had been too much. Her bedside vigil had grown heartbreaking. Every night, in penance for some offense she still could not identify, she sat by his bedside and reconstructed the burned fragments of his notes. She read aloud from the theories until she herself had them nearly memorized. She grilled Yawgmoth to provide what he remembered of the missing pages. None was enough. None of it brought her husband back. Did not so much as open an eye or mutter a word. Yawgmoth spoke a word, spoke three. Come with me. That was the main reason Rebecca had come. Yawgmoth had asked her to. She could use a couple of months away from the sick bed, a couple of months in the company of this visionary genius, tirelessly saving Halcyon and the whole Empire. That was why Yawgmoth made this trip, to save the Empire. He had found advanced cases of phthisis among elders and eldists of the Council. This was no longer a plague of the poor. Many of those suffering from the phthisis had once opposed the efforts they now benefited from. That sent a scare through the whole Empire. The Council voted that Yawgmoth should establish healing corps in the other 7 city-states. Each would be run by healers trained by Yawgmoth himself. 14 such healers rode now in a cutter of midships. Another group of 30 or so would meet them in the cities, one-time exiles with Yawgmoth. This corps of eugenicists would train locals in the treatment of phthisis, the principles of physical medicine, surgical technique, drug application, experimentation, vivisection, and techniques for handling hostile interviews and plague revolts. They would be healers and fighters. After these 2 months, each city of the Empire would have the seed of a healing army planted in its heart. To make one trip count for 2, Yawgmoth would also assess the military reforms in each city-state. He was empowered to suggest and sometimes require further action to reform the weak and corruption-riddled Imperial Guard and Thran army. That is why Yawgmoth made the trip. Healers and soldiers. Look, there, is that the Delta? Rebecca asked. She pointed beyond the shell of the forewing. There, the wide brown river that had snaked lazily through the basin emptied into an alluvial plain. Among hulking willows and tall tangles of cypress, a city spread. Its lights glimmered low above the ever-present water. Every fire cast a shimmering twin in the black flood beneath. The outlying homes seemed natural outgrowths of the muddy embankments. Some had a globular logic, like bubbles mounting above a submerged pocket of decay. Others were bulbous and half-sunken like the cypress roots that surrounded them. Thatched lodges shouldered their round roofs among palms. Stilt houses waded in furtive herds in the gentler eddies and backwaters of the almighty river. Rebecca laughed. She could not remember the last time she had laughed. Yawgmoth smiled, turning toward her. What is it? The architecture of the Empire, she giggled happily. Beautiful forms, perfectly adapted to the landscape, perfectly evolved for this watery basin. But can you imagine any of these shaggy ungulates lining the streets of Halcyon? He was laughing now, too. A bit too earthy, yes? A bit too marshy, Rebecca added, wiping a tear from her eye. Behind buildings like these, you'd expect to find gnat swarms and piles of droppings. Yawgmoth slapped the arm of his seat. Now, don't make me crash. Deeper into the delta, the traditional materials, thatch, bamboo, mud, and wood, were replaced by stone, mortar, plaster, and glass. The natural duns and reds gave way to shades of white and gray. The small-scale forms were amplified and reinvented in a civic architecture of domes and curves. Rebecca shook her head and sighed contentedly as the cutter passed alongside the white tumble of the central city. I shouldn't laugh. There's much I can learn here. Many beautiful forms. Yawgmoth released one lever he had been drawing back, and his hand dropped, warm and muscular, to her knee. If laughter is all Lusanin can offer you, just now, it offers plenty. The quarantine in the Caves of the Damned was filling. Gix laughed ruefully. Lovely beds. The loads of lumber had kept coming, and the refugees atop them. According to plans Yawgmoth had sent, Gix and his crew had constructed deep shelves along the walls of the great cavern. The sick would lie there, side by side, heads outward. Each shelf was tilted toward the wall, with the lower half of the patients left bare. Liquid and solid waste were channeled down to fall between the scaffold and the wall. Once a week, a brigade of buckets doused the patients, and the overflow rinsed their bunks. Yawgmoth considered it an innovation. Gix considered it an atrocity. Lesions grew rampantly, bed sores and splinters ravaged skin. Rancid meat gruel was ladled into cracked lips. In wet darkness, the sick lay. They died. Patients were encouraged to report deaths immediately. It meant more elbow room and more gruel. Health Corps workers stripped the fresher bodies, pierced them with meat hooks, and hoisted them to a conveyor that crossed the ceiling. They were disposed of in an adjacent cavern, redolent with steam. The dead who had begun to rot were left longer, some so rat-eaten that only bone and hair remained for the burrows. Once a week, serum arrived. Once a day, there was more rancid meat gruel. Atrocity. Were Gix to rebel, Yawgmoth would simply cut off the supply of serum. Every last one would die. Corpses ensconced in a wall crypt. If Gix obeyed, these poor wretches lived on, and another batch of prisoners got to ascend. Better to live in atrocity than to die in glory. It had become the commanding principle of Gix's life. It was why he had not died in that first attack on the Mana Rig 4 years ago. It was why he had not killed Glacian, had not killed Rebek, had called off the riots and become the servant of the oppressor. All Gix's ideals melted away before the simmering gaze of death. Self-preservation kept Gix alive, but transformed him into the image of his cruel master. A runner came up on the footpath. He was a young boy, the one who had arrived on that first elevator ride. He had survived an ordeal that had killed a man. The message was not lost on the lad. He made himself Gix's assistant, was ever present, and damnably helpful. Gix didn't even know his name. There's another shipment arriving, lumber and lepers. The boy had overheard Gix's disparaging comment one day and had made it standard terminology. Word has it that they're 23 this time. Damn that Yawgmoth! Gix cursed. We've no more room! No point cursing Yawgmoth, the boy pointed out unhelpfully. He's the one who put you here, boy. He's the one who damned you. An ingenious smile crossed his face. He's the one who'll save me, like he saved those others. The upper caves are emptying. He calls people to the light. It was a religious rhetoric from the faith of the damned. The cult had arisen in the last year, and it made a savior of Yawgmoth. Gix hissed. Everyone who climbs out of here climbs a pile of corpses. You know, with the upper caves emptying, we could take over one of them, make it a quarantine. There'd be room for hundreds more. Blinking wearily, Gix sighed. Yes, of course, it is a good idea. Health Corps were operational now in the 7 Thran city-states. 14 pairs of founders were in place, 30-some eugenicists had returned from exile, and locals were lining up to learn to heal and fight. Among the citizens, many cases were already diagnosed. A great many artificers, forever surrounded by Power Stone matrices, were succumbing to the disease. The oldest and best artificers were the most sorely afflicted. They who once had banished the eugenicists were now at their mercy. Hastily built quarantine camps were filling with artificers. The camps were built and maintained by a new soldiery. The Imperial Guard and Thran army had undergone purges at the highest levels. Young officers had been promoted and indoctrined into the new military philosophy. They were accountable to the Council, of course, and the Council was Yawgmoth. These fighting forces would work hand in glove with the Healing Corps to protect the people from foes internal and external. Folk who had lived in complacent ignorance only a year before now saw threats at every hand. Each danger made them love Yawgmoth the more. He was as much a savior in Losinen and Xingong, Wington and Yorin, as he was in Halcyon. Between healers and soldiers and civilians, Yawgmoth's every spare moment was taken up. His time had passed in a flurry of activity. For Rebek, the 2 months had been a long respite. She had wandered the greatest boulevards in the Empire, had toured the vast temples and palaces and state houses of the ancient land. To be immersed in its stone colonnades, to see how light strode through it, to taste the air that breathed from ancient masonry, all of it had been a communion with bygone minds. Rebek had tried to convey this to Yawgmoth, but only in the cutter did they have any time to talk. Usually, he dominated those moments. He spoke of his health program and his hopes for the future of the nation that once banished him. Now, at last, she had the chance. They were flying home over a high and beautiful land. Snow-capped mountains lorded over wide valleys, green with summer. Pines climbed the chiseled heights. Crystalline rivers chanted in rocky beds below. Black earth filled the glades, aspens shimmered with cool wind. "Look at this sweet place," Yawgmoth said with a contented sigh. "Look at it. This is what I want for our people, for all of our people. A life of splendor and plenty, yes, but not in overcrowded cities rank with disease. A life in wide, natural spaces, a life in paradise beneath the skies." "Do you know what I want? What I've been looking at?" Rebecca blurted in a rush. "I've been looking at the past, but I've been seeing the future. In old crypts, I've seen castles in the clouds, and they're perfectly possible. The Thran Temple could be a floating universe. I've been looking at art, but this is what I've been seeing." She opened her sketch pad. From the page, unmistakably, a drawing of Yawgmoth peered forth. His piercing eyes and chiseled jaw and broad shoulders had been rendered in quick and expert lines in the style of an elder's bust. "And this," she flipped the page, which showed Yawgmoth again, this time in the style of the old emperors. "And this." The next page showed him in a frieze that depicted the 8 patriarchs of the Thran as they entered the virgin continent. "And this." He was no less than a god in that final depiction, mortals rising as formless clay figures in his shaping palm. Each of these images Yawgmoth took in with a single, intense stare. Each time, face impassive, he turned his eyes back on the grand panorama before him. "Do you see?" Rebecca asked. "Do you see what I've seen?" His lips were a grim line on his face. "You've seen a lot of sculpture." "No, I've seen through a lot of sculpture. I've seen the future. The future is you." He blinked. He took a deep breath. "I'm not sure what to say to that." Rebecca saved him the trouble, leaning across the helm of that great cutter, kissing him full on the lips. She cradled the back of his head in her hand, felt the warmth of his lips, breathed in the scent of him. Yawgmoth pushed her gently back. What are you doing?" Her eyes searched his. "What do you mean, what am I doing?" He seemed almost to blush. The great granite Yawgmoth blushed. "It's just that with these icy peaks, they can come up suddenly. I don't want to risk a crash." He paused, seeming to sense how awkward he was being, and laughed lightly. "I don't want to risk the future." Rebecca sat back in the seat. She felt as though he had sliced her open and dragged all her insides out on the floor. "It'll be good to see the city again," Yawgmoth said. "I have some new ideas for treating your husband." And then had spitted and roasted her heart on a slow flame.